Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks so much once again for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. On the satellite today, we've got continued systems in strong southerly flow here across the Northeast Pacific, Eastern Gulf of Alaska area. See several disturbances caught up in that flow moving northward. One right here southwest of Yakutat, and then even a weaker center over toward the west a little bit there. Another one farther down to the south, not keeping the southeast coast in the clouds and wind and rain all day today, and that'll continue into tonight and into tomorrow, probably through the weekend as well. Otherwise, break here coming northward with moisture rolling on into the interior, with even some light snow north of the Alaska Range in areas up here, but breaking out, as you can see, back across the southwest, southern Kuskokwim Valley, on out to Kuskokwim Bay, and then again in across the Kenai Peninsula to Prince William Sound, and then more moisture down here to the south, bringing some light precipitation to mostly southwest Kodiak Island, but more so along the Alaska Peninsula here with a little bit more wind, but nothing too terribly strong. And then the offshore flow in advance of that, again clearing it out almost in Nunivak Island, but then the colder northerly winds here just to the west from the Pribilofs, some scattered snow showers, temperatures just above freezing there, down across the eastern Aleutians, high pressure building over the central Aleutian areas, but there is some moisture right in through here, kind of a weak system. That's going to be coming southward as a trough, so eventually that'll kick the showers up once again later tonight here for the areas mostly Atka eastward. And right on the edge of the picture there, the cirrus shield associated with the next pretty good storm system and front that looks like it'll be just mostly affecting the western Aleutians and southwest Bering as it comes in. On the chart today, here's that trough right through here. Brings snow showers from the Pribilofs, and again that'll shift southward later tonight, but snow showers occurring in brisk north winds, colder temperatures, eastern Aleutians, back up toward the Pribilofs, a little bit more in the way of those northwest winds, getting up about 30-35 miles an hour over toward Adak and Atka, stronger at Atka, and then diminishing here with high pressure back to the west to Shimia with light winds, dry conditions there. And then here's a weak low coming up, weakening about 1,002 millibars as it approaches the North Gulf Coast, keeping some showers actually diminishing today, this afternoon with the break coming up as this weakens. But along the southeast coast you can see a pretty good gradient there between the front and advance of the front and the ridging over British Columbia, and that's giving those southeast winds 25 to 30 miles an hour, some gusts 40, maybe even higher than that in some of the windier prone areas there, but mild air on those south winds, so rain all the way across the area there, even up to about Skagway. Along the North Gulf Coast, and you get into a mixed condition here, like we had overnight in south central Alaska, but anywhere inland and higher elevation, all in the form of snow, but light snow, very kind of areas of light snow here over the interior, down in toward the northern Kuskokwim mountainous areas, and then up toward the Brooks Range, and then this trough right along the Arctic coast lifting northward. Blizzard conditions today on the eastern Arctic coast. Those will gradually improve here this evening, but those northeast winds gusting to 40 miles an hour with the snow reducing visibilities to around zero. So there was the blizzard warning out on the east side until about 6 p.m. Friday evening. It's due to end with the advisory back to the west. Less snow, less wind here, but those winds will continue to be quite gusty along the western Arctic coast from about Point Ley down to, say, Point Hope, as winds diminish off to the east there. And it'll be mostly dry here over the northern Bering Sea with a gradual increase in those north winds through the Bering Strait to eventually St. Lawrence Island. You can see tonight a little bit of that moisture will slip on down from the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, so Tin City, Wales, look for some snow and an increase in those north winds down to about the north shore of St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, southwest interior here, not too bad, maybe a few breaks. Not much in the way of any snow shower activity. Whatever does fall will be quite light. Gets a little steadier up here along the northern portion of that trough on up to the north slope, especially along the central and eastern Arctic coast, but really losing the winds here, gradient diminishing, flattening out. Stays quite brisk, as I mentioned here, from about Point Lay into the Chukchi Sea, with a tightening gradient now through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. And then this frontal boundary right through here, kind of a trough extending up from the low center, is barely on the chart there. And east winds, that'll keep it mostly, precipitation mostly in the form of rain along the Alaska Peninsula. A little more mixed up here in Bristol Bay, but still milder air through here, colder air back to the west on the north winds. So rain and snow showers for the eastern Aleutians, narrow ridge right out through here, so dry from about AKwx now with lighter winds. And then looking at wind and rain just coming onto the picture there. And that'll be eventually pushing into the far western Aleutians, southwest Bering. Otherwise, for the southeast coast, stays wet and windy tonight with that frontal boundary hanging up right along the coastline. Showers back to the west there. And then for tomorrow, again, actually the first front kind of weakens and moves inland. Another one redevelops all in that southerly flow. Mild, wet conditions, windy, continue again through tomorrow for all of the Panhandle. Inland areas, higher elevations, areas of snow. Same story for the coastal range as well. Don't look for too much again into the Copper River Basin. Could be a little bit more around the Wrangell Mountains. The interior, variably cloudy. A few flurries really from the Kuskokwim Valley, Alaska Range northward to the Brooks Range. A little bit more snow up here over the north slope and back to the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, offshore flow clearing out a little bit up over the Kotzebue Sound area, Kobuk Valley, or I'm sorry, the Noatak Valley, down into Norton Sound and down also to the northern Bering Sea here. Snow showers, Pribilofs to the eastern Aleutians, a mixture for the Alaska Peninsula, mostly rain for Kodiak Island. And then out west now, a big increase in the, or a big tightening of the gradient for a big increase in the winds out over the western Aleutians there. Southeast gusty and possibly as high as 65 miles an hour in advance of this front. Surface pressure down to 955 millibars. But we've got this ridging, Arctic ridging coming into the northern Bering Sea. So this system isn't going to make any moves up into the northeast or into the Bering Sea, and we'll see for Sunday that frontal boundary just stays put there with this increasing northeast, becoming east wind here, kind of holds everything back to the west and actually weakens, coming up about 20 millibars by Sunday afternoon there for that low center. It's barely on the map. Trough here over the western interior, Kobuk Valley southward along the southwest coast of Bristol Bay. Pretty light snow with that feature. Gusty winds now with snow, St. Lawrence Island up through the Bering Strait, but dry here for the northwest coast, and then a lot less in the way of snowfall for the Arctic coast up there in the north slope, and not much wind. And then another intense storm here staying, well, actually quite a ways to the south, but the gradient tightening up pretty good. Look for those gale force winds to come back into the scene for Kodiak Island late in the day on Sunday. Increasing wind and probably rain along the North Gulf Coast with dry conditions in advance of that over much of the southeast coast, but the warm front will be spreading warm front type rain up into the southern Panhandle later in the afternoon, along with an increase in the winds. Lows for tonight looking something like this, either side of zero up along the Arctic coast there, single numbers north slope, teens into the interior, some areas down to maybe 5 above. And then much milder upper 20s, mid to upper 20s, south of the mountains, upper 20s for Bristol Bay, and upper 20s, lower 30s for the Aleutians with those chillier northerly winds, 40s to near 50 over the southern southeast coast. And then some highs tomorrow into the lower 50s here of the southern Panhandle, lower 40s to the north, 0 to 10 for the highs on the north slope and Arctic coast, teens to upper 20s, depending on your elevation over the interior, with good 35 to 40 degree weather from Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula out over the Aleutians, 35 to 40 also for south central Alaska. Low Sunday morning, upper 20s to lower 30s, still mild here over the southern part of the state, edging a little below zero there for the Arctic coast and north slope, and mild but not quite as mild for the Panhandle, and lower 30s for the Aleutians. And then the highs for Sunday, 40 to 45 for the Panhandle, shade above zero for the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, a lot of IFR here over the northeast Gulf of Alaska, right up along the coast and into the northern panhandle. Marginal VFR down to the south. Marginal VFR in North Gulf Coast here, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, and then into the IFR west of the Alaska Range, actually more along the Kuskokwim Mountains here, back out to the Yukon Delta coast, northeastward there across the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast. Otherwise pretty marginal everywhere else, but becomes VFR out over the central Aleutians and southwest Bering. Then for tomorrow afternoon, IFR slips on up here to the western Aleutians with the next pretty potent frontal boundary there coming in, really kicking the winds up. Otherwise marginal VFR, Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Area of IFR, Bristol Bay, again linking up with that area across the Kuskokwim and Auckland Mountain areas, and some IFR along the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, and pretty good area up here for the Brooks Range and the eastern North Slope and coastal areas. VFR breaking out there with the Tanana Valley, north of the Alaska Range, but areas of IFR over toward the Tok Northway area, and IFR holding pretty firm here along the North Gulf Coast of that southeast flow, east-southeast flow, keeping it socked in from Kodiak there up along over to just near Yakutat, and then this area actually pushes inland, and so it becomes marginal along the southeast coast. And for Sunday morning, marginal VFR mostly over the central areas to the border, and some lingering IFR here for the North Gulf Coast areas and the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, marginal VFR south central Alaska, IFR Kuskokwim Valley and mountains down to the Aleutian Range. And this area now kind of shifting back to the west, IFR central North Slope back to the western Arctic coast, and IFR slowly but slowly pushing eastward toward Adak. And we'll see for the afternoon VFR out there, IFR along the southwest coast from St. Lawrence Island to the Alaska Peninsula, VFR Tanana Valley back maybe into the northern Kuskokwim, IFR Brooks Range, and marginal VFR for the Panhandle. Some of this IFR showing up along the coast in the afternoon. Continued southeast flow keeps it IFR, Prince William Sound, coastal areas of the Kenai Peninsula to Kodiak. Passes Anatuvik tomorrow, IFR. And for Adigan, same forecast, IFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR in the offing for tomorrow, especially on the eastern entrances. And for Rainy, same forecast, marginal VFR. For the Windy Pass, though, looks like it'll be VFR on the valley side up there, but the pass and south, marginal. And for Isabel, marginal VFR. Mentasta, starting out marginal, probably becoming VFR by around midday tomorrow and throughout the afternoon. Tanita, VFR, possibly late in the day becoming marginal, especially on the eastern entrance. And for Portage, IFR, eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, surface here over the central Bering Sea, more or less into northern Bristol Bay. 2,000 feet, just catching the Alaska Peninsula. Eastern North Gulf Coast here, and then warmer down the southeast coast with that southerly flow, 6,000 to 8,000 feet. Icing, surges of moisture coming northward. Here's one lifting north, northern Panhandle, North Gulf Coast to Kodiak. Possibly here up over the north slope below about 2,000 feet, isolated areas of widespread moderate, and above 3,000 feet, mostly light to mixed here for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, with more pushing in out west there, but probably only catching Shimiana too. Jet stream, big trough out there associated with that next pretty potent front, really sharp ridge right through here, right into the western Bering Sea with a good northwest jet there sailing southeast. We're at 100 to up to 120 knots across the central Aleutians. Deep trough south of the Alaska Peninsula here, return flow coming right up. Again, surges of moisture, disturbances rolling northward. 90 knots there into the southeast coast with one trough lifting north tomorrow afternoon. Southwest 50 over the western North Slope and Brooks Range. 3,000 feet. Good flow here south to southeast, 40 to 50 knots there along and off the coast. Lighter over the interior, northeast 25 to 30, Alaska Peninsula up to 70 knots here, 9,000 feet way out west with the next storm. And at 3,000 feet, 60 knots here, far western Aleutians, light central Aleutians, northeast 25 to 35, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. and then these strong winds mostly along and off the coast, although pushing inland there, but 40 to 50 knots along the North Gulf Coast. And with that will be areas of moderate turbulence, the Panhandle and the Alaska Peninsula.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, well, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now I'm old enough in the weather satellite business.
You can remember when.
The new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition. Right. Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago. No. It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellites is launched, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect.
Yes.
And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before.
Okay.
Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care?
Okay.
You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin? It sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah. You know what though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey, but they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job, and it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Absolutely does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite. But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image. Thanks to the processing techniques, yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and more. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, Norton Sound pretty much iced in now, and then a narrow band here on down the southwest coast into Kuskokwim Bay, and then up, of course, Kotzebue Sound. And looks like the forecast with the northeast winds, looks like the ice pack here will be shifting west-southwestward over the next 4 or 5 days. And on to the marine forecast for tomorrow, southeast coast, south 35 gales with 16-foot seas, turning southeast and then easterly, all at 35 knots with 16-foot seas. Much lighter there, northern Lynn Canal, 15 out of the south, but coming up to 25 as you head towards Stevens Passage there, and gales coming into Clarence Strait out of the southeast with 11-foot seas. Then for Sunday, those come down about 25 knots there. Still small craft advisories all through the inside waters, right up through northern Lynn Canal from the south-southeast. And good gales now on the south coast, southeast 40 knots there, and minimum gales up to the north, again southeast turning east. And then for Prince William Sound tomorrow, north 20 knots, seas 3 feet, but gales again here along the North Gulf Coast, especially to the east side there, and then northeast 30, picking back up to 35 knots for the Barren Islands, and gales also for Kachemak Bay. Southern Cook Inlet out of the north 30 knots, and northern Cook Inlet northeast at 20 with 5-foot seas. Sunday, looking like this, full gales here along the North Gulf Coast, east-southeast winds. Easterlies at 40 right across the Barrens. Prince William Sound coming up to 30 knots, and seas rising to 6 feet. Gales for Kachemak Bay out of the east. Small craft advisory, southern Cook Inlet, no change for the areas north of the Forelands. And for Kodiak Island, east side here, east winds at 30. Gales, Shelikof Strait out of the northeast, east 30 from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And then small craft advisories here for the Alaska Peninsula, northeast 25 to 30, 11-foot seas. Also small crafts there for Bristol Bay. And then for Sunday, east 20 there, Bristol Bay. East 40, coming up to 40 knots, Kodiak Island. Getting that next big storm coming northward throughout the afternoon, 30 knots, Shelikof Strait. Just 15 knots here out of the east-northeast for the Alaska Peninsula, and 20 knots for Bristol Bay. Aleutians, tomorrow storms. Next strong front coming in, southeast, coming up to 55 knots in the afternoon for the far western Aleutians, 40 knots west of Adak. And then narrow ridge right through here, so we've got north-northwest, 30 knots coming down in the afternoon here for Atka, but that pattern holding all the way across Unalaska Island. And then for Sunday, northeast 15 to 20 out here, so diminishing. And picking back up the small crafts for Atka to about Adak, and hold on to the gales out over the western Aleutians 35 to 40. But the system starting to weaken, so definitely losing the storm force winds out west. Southwest coast here, out of Kuskokwim Bay, northeast 25, north 30 for the Perblofs, 11-foot seas, 25 knots for St. Matthew Island. And then we've got small craft advisories here from Nunivak Island all the way up to the Bering Strait. And then the forecast for Sunday, gales for St. Lawrence Island, small craft advisories down to Nunivak Island, northeast 20 there, south of Nunivak Island, small craft advisories for the Perblofs, and gales for the northern Bering Sea and St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east 20 tomorrow with ice covered, no seas all the way around now. And small craft advisories now restricted to areas from here from Cape Thompson down to Wales, north 30 knots, otherwise brisk wind advisories here for the western Arctic coast. And then moving on to Sunday, east-northeast 20 knots, pretty uniform pattern through the weekend, both wind-wise, and northeast 20 also for the central coast, on down, picking up from about Point Lay southward there, all the way to Cape Thompson, looking at about 30-knot winds. And gales now from Cape Thompson down to the Bering Strait, north 35 knots, 12-foot seas. Forecast for tonight, not too bad over the interior, variably cloudy, a few flurries, light snow showers scattered around, especially up here along the Brooks Range area from looks like the Kobuk Valley Arctic coast. But those winds coming down, losing the blizzard warnings end to 6 p.m. and diminishing winds through the night, staying brisk here on the west side. And pretty breezy, colder temperatures coming southward there over the eastern Aleutians, wet over the Panhandle. Big storm coming in tomorrow. Again, the storm's out over the far western Aleutians. More wind and rain for the southeast coast. Another front lifting northward in the afternoon. And then a big storm coming onto the picture Sunday afternoon. So that's going to, again, bring those gales into Kodiak Island. And big increase in the winds across the northern Gulf of Alaska. No change over the interior as well as the Bering Sea.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.